Two straight games, two straight late heroic comebacks for Boston College. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. I'm also the editor and publisher of Eagle Insider. Check out my work over there. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get yourself started. Boston College looked like garbage for about 3/4 of the game against Western Kentucky on Saturday, but a late drive and great fourth quarter plays by Donovan Ezeiruaku and Grayson James brings home a stunning 21-20 victory. Call it stunning because it felt like they had no chance of winning this one. And to talk about this, we brought on Eagle Insider and regular guest of the show, Mitchell Wolf. Mitch, how's it going?
No matter how you get there, it's always better to talk about a win than a loss. And we were a little more worried on Friday after we found out Castellanos wasn't going to play. I think we were still, it seems like a little too optimistic, but they ended up pulling it out. And like you said, yesterday's show, I'm not sure how much longer this team can keep getting away with it, but I think that it's very clear that the coaching staff deserves a lot of praise for their ability to kind of get them out of these situations and turn them into wins.
So let's jump in from the beginning. Boston College comes out. Their defense struggles against Western Kentucky, who runs, their quarterback, Caden Veltkamp. He moves the ball pretty efficiently against them all for that first half. The offense, I think it was, what was it, the second drive that Grayson James just threw a ball right to, I don't know who, I was there and I couldn't tell who he was throwing it to.
Yeah.
And it just looked like everything was just kind of off kilter. I know Bill O'Brien talked about it at length after the game that, they've got to start off better than what they've been doing. But what did you see to start this game off? Because it was ugly to watch.
So let's talk about the defense first. This game plan was very reminiscent of the Missouri game plan in that it was take away deep shots, prevent explosive plays, force short underneath passes, rally and tackle. For the most part, they did a pretty good job of that. Rewatching the tape, a lot of the quote missed assignments were kind of check downs against zone coverage. So that if the running back is leaking out late, there's probably not going to be somebody covering him immediately. There was another time where I think it was the tight end coming on the drag route and Cam Arnold went to go cover it and the ref tripped him. And then he ended up missing the tackle, but still the ref trips the guy. There was another play where they ran kind of a mesh concept. The other receiver picked one of the defenders, no call on offense pass interference. So they made some hay there. Caden Veltkamp did some good job scrambling early in the game, and then they kind of started taking that away. And if you look at the two touchdown drives, one is their second drive, which BC punts. I think they don't go 3 and out, but basically 3 and out. West Kentucky starts at their own 37, so pretty good field position. They score a touchdown. Next drive, they get a very short field when BC throws an interception. Those are their only 2 touchdowns. And BC does a pretty good job of, again, bowing up in the red zone. Again, 2 touchdowns here, so not great, but for the most part, bowing up in the red zone, forcing field goals. Second half completely flipped around. In terms of performance, the game plan was pretty much the same. I think they might have played a little more man, not sure yet. We don't have the coverage stats yet, but that's kind of my gut feeling about it. And they were able to execute that. Big shout out to Ashton McShane, true freshman cornerback who replaced Max Tucker, had a really good game. I think he got targeted once, and it was a drop. So good game from him. And the pass rush started getting home, and that's a big part of that. Donovan Ezeiruaku. They let West Kentucky run the ball a little bit, which again didn't shock me. I was surprised at how the run defense wasn't as good as I hoped it would be. Defensive line wasn't getting as many stops aside from Ezeiruaku, basically. But I thought a lot of the tackling in space, and granted, maybe it was in situations that weren't ideal, but some really impressive tackling in space. Davion Crouch on that third down that forced the fourth down attempt. KP Price had some incredible tackles, the one that saved a touchdown. Other guys, obviously Donovan Ezeiruaku, which we're going to say his name a billion times tonight. Cam Horsey made some plays, obviously, but yeah, and BC in the second half, everybody gets on Tim Lewis in the first half, like, oh, this guy sucks. He doesn't know what he's doing. And every game in the second half, they turn around. BC currently is 12th, tied for 12th in the country in second half points allowed, ironically tied with Colorado. But that's really amazing. And they only allowed 3 second half points in this game, and they came off the fumble by Lewis Bond, where again, West Kentucky had a short field, and then after that, they didn't score again.
So let's also jump and talk a little bit about the offense, because when we're talking the first half, Grayson James is thrown into this game, and there's some folks out there that thought he would be like a seamless transition to from Thomas Castellanos, and I was a little skeptical because I've watched enough of him over the summer, but you got to go with what you got. I know he could make some plays, and right away he throws that bad interception. But to his credit, he kind of slows things down in that second half. Looks a lot better. What changed for him in this game? Because he looked like in the fourth quarter, I think he combined for like 68 yards or something like that. What did you see that was different from him?
I think one, he just settled down. I think he was probably nervous. This is his first start in over a year. It's kind of a big spot. He's not. I mean, he was probably expected to during the week, but this is you're coming off the bench. You got to get a win here. It's against a team that we mentioned he played before and lost 73-0. So I imagine there were some nerves there, and you saw it early on where there were plays where he kind of held on to the ball too long. And watching those, I would say there were times where receivers were open. Sometimes there weren't. Sometimes he got pressured too quickly. So it's not all in him. Like there's blame to go around. Interception was absolutely terrible. I don't know why he was trying to throw to Kamari Morales. He wasn't really pressured. I just don't get it. It was a bad decision. But he definitely recovered, and he wasn't afraid to throw the ball over the middle, which is something that usually newer, younger quarterbacks are sometimes afraid to do. We saw that a lot on this one concept that I'm going to be writing about for this week's rewatch, where I'll go read about it on the website. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the podcast trying to describe it in an audio medium. But they ran this one play a ton, and he was very good at executing it. And then I think just as he got more comfortable in the offense, he settled down. Additionally, the offensive line started getting some push in the run game, so that allowed them to use that more to get them in better down and distance situations, which didn't force him to be like, okay, it's 3rd and 7. I got to go make a play. I got to make a tough throw. And even sometimes he did make tough throws on third downs. He had the 2 out routes to Jaden Skeet, which I think at least one of them was like an audible to check to that play against the blitz. So that was good. So overall, I think he exceeded my expectations from an overall standpoint. I still definitely want Thomas Castellanos to be the starter for this team. I think that the offense was definitely not a seamless transition because, no matter where you want to put the blame, scoring only 21 points and needing, the largest fourth quarter comeback in BC history or since, time immemorial or whatever. Yeah, that's just not going to be good enough to win games in the ACC.
In a moment, we'll talk more about the game, the big plays down the stretch that caused BC to win this game, including a defensive player that was playing out of his mind. We'll get into all that in just a moment. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Mitch, I was actually talking to my wife about this segment on a car ride home today, and about your policy of fading everything that I pick, and it worked again this weekend. So let's go over our picks. So
it was not good,
right? Alabama and Georgia was, I think, the only one I won because I picked Alabama, and that one had me very nervous I was going to lose it. I think we both flailed on Louisville and Miami, correct?
Yeah, I did see some people. I did see, it wasn't FanDuel's line, but I did see a line that was 7, so there would have been a push somewhere other places. But yeah, we missed on that one. I think I didn't know that Quincy Riley wasn't going to play, Louisville's cornerback. That I don't know if that would flip my pick, but it would have been nice to know at the time.
And then what was the other one? It was
Miami, Virginia Tech.
Oh, Miami, Virginia Tech. Yeah,
which we were very, very much wrong on.
Yep. So rough weekend for us. But if you're thinking about FanDuel, you can get yourself started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right. Locked on Boston College, AJ Black here, joined as always on Mondays during football season with Mitchell Wolf. And we're talking about, as we said, another big comeback. And if you want to hear more, go check out Locked On ACC. Make sure you also find Locked On Boston Postcast. That's where I do my post-game show the day of the game. So I ran home after the game. I was there as a fan. Shout out to a couple of the readers out there and listeners who ran into me. And we do it on a different channel. So you got to make sure you find Locked On Boston Postcast. And it's got like Red Sox Postcast, Patriots Postcast, but you guys want mine. So go find Locked On Boston Postcast there. Now, the game came down to that fourth quarter, and the impetus was that incredible strip sack by Donovan Ezeiruaku. Second game in a row with a huge play that just turned the game on its head. I think the fumble on the kickoff return against Michigan State was the big one there. This one was Ezeiruaku, who now leads the nation in sacks with 8. Mitch, what are you seeing out of this guy, and how did he change this game?
I loved his post-game quote where he said, we didn't come out with enough energy in the second half or something. And he said, I took that personally, quoting Michael Jordan from the Last Dance documentary. And I mean, you would have thought that Western Kentucky's offensive tackle, specifically the left tackle, had said something disrespectful about Donovan Ezeiruaku's mother, because he had that left tackle in the 9th circle of hell for basically this entire game, especially in the second half. Obviously leads the team in tackles 14, which is crazy for a defensive end, especially. And rewatching it, they'd had some plays where they used him as the read defender, so you don't have to block him. So you on an option, you leave him unblocked, and basically where he goes, you go the other way. So that's the one thing they did. Other than that, they didn't really double team him. There was the play where they just didn't block him on outside zone and ran the other way, and he just tracked it down and got it for a tackle for loss. There are plays where he just blew up a puller, and that stacked up the puller behind him, and then that stacked up the running backs, and then they tackled him for no gain. Obviously had the sack earlier in the previous drive, I think, which was big. This strip sack, huge. Just kind of a great sense of timing of, okay, we need to get the ball back here. And it was so funny watching that play because he gets the strip sack and George Rooks sees it immediately and pounces on it. But the left tackle is just standing there. He doesn't do anything. He's just looking at the ball. And I'm just like, dude, if you had just fallen on it, West Kentucky might have kept the ball there. And that would have been huge. And then again, the thing with Ezeiruaku is he's even getting still pressures beyond that. He only had 5 pressures total in the game, but again, 3 sacks and I think 2 QB hits. So every time he's getting pressure, it's impacting the quarterback and impacting the play. And honestly, Nedawek-Paula had a pretty good game in terms of pressure, had some decent run stops. Cam Horsley, again, not as huge productive pass rusher, but still dominant against the run, had the one batted pass to force a 4th down, I think force a field goal. So that was huge. But yeah, I mean, Ezeiruaku was just a man possessed. I don't think anybody was really stopped. Nobody was going to stop him in this game. He was just unblockable.
And I think this is another game where we have to shout out the linebackers again, because I know there were times where they got picked and it was tough, but you look at the Pro Football Focus grades and compare them, the same guys from other than Vinny Palma, who's not there, from last year to this year. I mean, Cam Arnold last year it seemed like he was consistently in the 50s in scoring. And that when we were always trying to, I don't want to say make excuses for him, but explaining away why he was always there. He's at 75 now. And he and Crouch together have been having solid game after solid game. And I know Arnold had the interception in this one. What did you see from the linebackers in this?
Yeah. And grading well at linebacker, if you're a true off-ball linebacker, grading well in PFF is very difficult because, again, and we talked about this a ton last year, offenses do so much to try to target linebackers, and just whatever they do, it's going to make them – you're going to be wrong. There was this one play where Western Kentucky did get a good pass because what they did is they had the tight end go across the field in the drag route, and then basically – or they had him delay the drag route, and they had the running back leak out and go – to his right, and then the tight end ran the drag in the opposite way. So Crouch is in conflict there. He goes to the running back because he's on that side of the field, but then there's nobody else on the other side of the field just because of how the route combinations develop. And again, Crouch and Arnold, I think, they miss, each one tackle a game, which that's going to happen sometimes. It's funny, you watch NFL Sunday and guys are still missing tackles. It's it just happens sometimes. So, I don't think people need to get super mad about that. But, and Crouch, again, first year starting, still learning. This is a complicated offense for linebackers just because there's so many moving parts, so many things going in different directions. So them just not being a liability is huge for this defense because the defensive line is doing their job, especially in the run defense, and that allows those guys to go make plays. And there was one play where Arnold read a puller and that got him out of position, and that was bad. But, I mean, that's just it's a good scheme by Western Kentucky. Just that's going to happen to basically any linebacker unless you have elite instincts, or you can see the future, which basically that's a player like Luke Kuechly or Bobby Wagner. That's a very rare trait. But yeah, I mean, again, I think people, I get people were frustrated with the first half from the defense, but I honestly think they did a pretty good job, especially buckling down the second half. I thought the game plan was solid and I think the game plan is solid, especially if if Thomas Castellanos plays this game. I think BC's offense is humming a lot better. They're scoring points. And then you put Western Kentucky's offense in the position that they were in the second half earlier in the game. And we saw that once they got down and once BC was kind of mounting a comeback, they kind of started to fall apart. They were committing penalties. They had a bunch of drops. They allowed the strip sack. So yeah, I think that if you do that earlier, then they start falling apart, and then BC can run away with that if Thomas Castellanos is playing, the offense is moving better, which the offense wasn't.
And, for the defense, what are your thoughts right now? We're 5 games in. You mentioned that Tim Lewis, people sometimes, I see it on Twitter, and they're like, fire Tim Lewis. And it's kind of like everyone, you think it's silly a little bit for BC fans, but that's college football, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like every fan base, it's fire everyone. That's all they want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I personally, just watching, have been really impressed with what Tim Lewis has done. It reminds me almost, and I don't know if I'm right on this, but it feels like like the bend don't break. It feels a lot like Spaz when he was the defensive coordinator. I know that might be before your time, but like it's good. It doesn't put up a ton of points unless you're playing like a team like Mizzou, and it's tough. But I've with the you're basically playing with a lot of the cogs that you had last year, minus like Elijah Jones, which was a big one.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like he's maximized the talent that he has, and he's got Ezeiruaku humming. You got Cam Horsley playing pretty well. I mean, the secondary at times they've struggled, but it's not a huge liability.
I mean, let's compare it to last year when it was Jeff Halfley's defense, which was very aggressive, and in comparison to a bend don't break defense, that defensive style with BC's talent or lack thereof was extremely brittle. Where if it was very susceptible to explosive plays. You think about the Florida State game, on defense where they were really struggling. The Louisville game, obviously, where that kind of defense puts a lot of stress on a defense that doesn't necessarily have equal talent to opponents. And BC theoretically should have superior talent to Western Kentucky, but this is a safer defense that is basically saying we're gonna, we're not gonna blitz a lot. We're gonna drop a lot in zone. We're gonna try to keep everything ahead of us. And again, compared to last last few years, tackling is extremely improved. So that strategy works, and it's not going to work every single play, but on the average, it's going to work most of the time. You're going to have a few breaks, have a few busts here, and we saw that more against Michigan State, a lot of coverage busts. I would say there were not a lot of coverage busts in this game where 2 guys covered the same receiver and left one wide open. There wasn't a lot of that. There was well-designed offense by Western Kentucky that, and again, like I think Western Kentucky attempted. I'm going to try to pull the stat up really quick. It's probably going to take forever. They attempted 2 passes of more than 20 yards. Neither of them were completed, and one of them was picked. They attempted 8 passes of between 10 and 20 yards. 5 of the 8 were completed for 84 yards. So, and most of them were over the middle. So not like a ton of production there. Almost all their passing game was below 10 yards, and BC just had to rally and tackle. And again, I think for the most part, they did well doing that.
Yeah. I just, especially with like Western Kentucky, I thought, as you said, like they have a pretty unique offense. They do a lot of different things. I thought BC did a pretty good job. And, you mentioned it earlier, but BC in the last 2 weeks has only allowed 9 points and I know I got to give you credit for finding that for me. 9 points in the second half combined Michigan State and Western Kentucky. So they've been able to rally and figure out things under Tim Lewis. Now in the final segment, let's talk a little bit about Will Lawing. He's a guy that we really haven't talked about, and I want to get your thoughts on the scheme that they put together for Grayson James. Maybe talk a little bit about the end of the game and maybe a few nuggets that we have. We'll get into that in just a moment. I am a huge fan of going to sporting events. I obviously was just at the BC game as a fan this weekend. I love going to theater events, concerts, wrestling, whatever you can think of. I love getting tickets to events. It's the thing I like to do. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. best part about Game Time, there's two things that they have that I think are really great. One is the seat finder. I hate getting tickets and not knowing where I'm going to sit, and it's always, it's a gamble. You could get tickets and they could be great. You could also have one that's like behind a pole. It's the worst. With Game Time, you know exactly where you're going to sit. Most of the stadiums, they have live seat charts. That way, there's no guesswork there. And they also have all-in ticket pricing for many of their tickets, where you get all the fees put in, so you don't have to have any guessing of how much you're going to pay. What you see is what you're going to pay. Now, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you for making Locked On Boston College your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On College Football. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin has got you covered for an exciting season on the gridiron. Find Locked On College Football on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is Locked On Boston College, AJ Black, and I'm here with Mitchell Wolf. We're wrapping things up here, talking about Western Kentucky. BC is now 4-1. And if you are on FanDuel earlier this year and didn't live in the state of Massachusetts like myself, you could have put in your wager for 4.5 wins, I believe was the beginning of the season for their win totals. One more win and you got it. And you obviously want to see them win a lot of games, but you look at UNC melting down and you're saying that one looks pretty prime right now to be number 5 at least. But let's talk about the end of this game, and let's talk about the offense too. Grayson James, he's put into a predicament where he's going to be the starter. This is something I'm sure he is really hoped for. He struggles at first. The offense not doing a whole lot. What did you see out of how Will Lawing put together this offense and some of the challenges that it kind of brought up?
I think that some of the play calling ideas were good. I thought that obviously BC was going to run the ball a lot, try to take the game out of James's hands as much as they could, which was a bit of a struggle early on. The offensive line wasn't getting as much push as they should have against a group of 5 defensive line, which we talked about them being like appropriately sized actually to face Power 5 line. And eventually, once you got in the second half, they did kind of start buckling and, getting run on. The BC offensive line was getting a lean on them. We saw guys really starting to get a push. And Kai Robichaux had a great game. We didn't expect him to play, and he came in and had a fantastic game. Trayshawn Ward contributed a lot as a receiver as well. Didn't have as many great big runs, but was very helpful there. My problem with Will Lawing in this game were there were a lot of passes, especially in like third and medium to third and like kind of like third and like 7, 3rd and 8, maybe 3rd and 10, where he's calling these very deep, kind of longer developing routes that were struggling to get open sometimes, or they were just taking too long. And that was tough for James because he was having trouble reading the field and making a quick decision on those. And there were times where guys were open, but sometimes he just didn't see them or he kind of panicked too early and started scrambling in the pocket and sometimes got brought down for sacks where he just had to throw the ball away. So I feel like I would be fine if they would have some more, just call a shorter pass on 3rd down and then have, get some run after catch opportunities. With that in mind, I think this team's screen game is disastrous, especially the wide receiver screens. I mean, none of these are working. They tried that double screen that got dirted, that James just threw in the dirt, which they had Jaden McGowan open on the bubble screen on the first read. I was like, just throw it there. That's fine. But those are just not working great. I mean, and it didn't help that Lewis Bond didn't have his best game. I had that bad fumble, had another drop, had one that he bobbled and then caught, but it basically turned into a gain of nothing. Kind of seemed like he was hunting for some big plays, like the way he was kind of running back towards the middle of the field, which was a little dangerous. But yeah, just not a great game from him. Tough game for Reed Harris too. Just didn't have any catches. Had the drop in the end zone, which good play by the defensive back, but still a drop nonetheless. And just didn't get a lot of good balls thrown his way that he could have actually made a play on. But great game for Jerron Bradley in the tight ends, the receiving game. Offensive line, like I mentioned, got better in the second half running game. Had some issues with pass blocking, and that was something that we talked a lot about, was how are they going to be able to handle West Kentucky's very aggressive blitz-heavy defense with all these exotic fronts, which they had some issues with. And then there was also a play where Jack Conley got walked back into Grayson James for a sack by like a 6'4", 240-pound linebacker, and that just cannot happen. You cannot have that happen. But yeah, I mean, I would say with Loing, I think the playbook was absolutely shrunk this week. You saw a lot of repeated concepts and plays. The one play I mentioned, Bear Tulane, they ran 9 times. You saw they ran mesh once or twice. They ran fake mesh once or twice. So you saw a lot of repeated plays. So it's the playbook was very small for Grayson James. I imagine that they're going to re-expand that with Tommy coming back. I'm also wondering if they have been holding out a big section of the playbook for ACC play. Don't put these kind of plays on tape. We can win with these other plays. Again, maybe this is just hopium/copium and me trying to project something that isn't there. But even taking into account Grayson James, the weather against Michigan State, a good SEC defense in Missouri, a terrible FCS defense in Duquesne, and an unmotivated defense in FSU. We still haven't really seen this offense fully click. They're not scoring enough points. They're not being consistent enough with moving the ball down the field. And that's eventually, and it almost came back to bite them here. It probably should have. It didn't. And that's good. And I'll say this. The punting was not terrible. It was okay. There was, Ivan Savenko had some nice punts to pin West Kentucky deep in the second half. He had one early on that wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. So that's a nice progression.
Yeah. I was watching that, and I think every BC fan at this point holds their breath every time they punt the ball. And it's, they did what they needed to do there. And the special teams were fine for most of that game.
Had Liam Connor make his return, and he made all the extra points. And that's all you can ask him. So that's good.
Yep. Again, that last extra point, I'm sitting there in the stands holding my breath going, oh, God, it's going to – and I think there was one extra point that Luke McLaughlin had to grab down.
I think it might have been that one.
Yeah, and they all jumped on him after to give him a big hug because that was big. Yeah. I could even see it from the stands. I was like, oh, boy, that was a bad snap. Is Drew Kendall doing the snaps?
No, it's Bryant Worrell. He's the one that transfers from – Got it. He was originally at Old Dominion and went – I forget what the name of it is. It's like it's a two-name college, like William and Mary, but it's not William and Mary. It's something else. I can't remember. But I mean, honestly, up until these high snaps, I thought he's been pretty good. I thought that he has actually been like down at the ball on a lot of punts, which is impressive for a long snapper. So if he gets that fixed, I think he's done a pretty decent job, honestly.
Yeah. So if you wanted more of the details of the game, I do my postcast is all about the game. So if you want that, the goal for these Monday, postcast versus this episode, Mitch has had some time to sit in and mull on some of the big storylines of the game. And this is what we're talking about here.
Before we go, we should talk about this. I thought Bill O'Brien's decision to try to use the timeouts the second half was fine.
Okay, we'll talk about that, please, because I know a lot of folks were complaining.
Yeah, a lot of people were mad about it. I think so. It's under 2 minutes. They call a timeout on 2nd and 10, 9-yard gain, 3rd and 1. They call another timeout to get the stop. I thought that was fine. You want to try to get the ball back to get a possession before halftime to get a score. I know it saved time for West Kentucky, and they eventually turned it into a field goal. I don't think that's a bad decision. You want to get the ball back for your offense, try to give them an opportunity to get some more points on the board before halftime, and you get the ball after halftime too. So I did not hate that decision. That decision at all. I get that the results didn't work out, but I like the process. I also thought in the beginning of the second half, there was the play where BC had to use their first timeout because the refs didn't let them substitute properly, which forced BC to call a timeout. And then also on that 4th and 1, West Kentucky did false start and they weren't called for it. So that was some not great calls by the refs. Also the pass interference of Kari Johnson, which was the most uncatchable pass I've ever seen in my life, was ridiculous. I'm sure there were missed calls that, there was actually one play where I honestly thought Davian Crouch could have been ejected for targeting. Or he blitzed Caden Velkamp and hit him with his helmet, kind of. So BC got away with one there. I'm sure there were holding penalties and such. But again, BC, I think only 2 penalties. One was the offsides by Ezeiruaku. The other one was the pass interference by Kari Johnson, which I completely disagree with. So another great game in terms of penalties for BC, and they really started to hurt West Kentucky down the stretch too.
So from here, now we have to wait. Now the waiting game starts as what's going on with Thomas Castellanos? Is he going to be ready for UVA? I think everyone's got their fingers crossed because, it was great to see Grayson James get a win. Offense is very different with Tommy Castellanos back there, and I think this team needs it against UVA, who's improved. And we'll have Mitch on Friday for Friday's show to preview the game against the Hoos. Mitch, where can people find your work?
You can find me at Mitch D. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. Check out my work at Eagle Insider. We'll have the game rewatches up this week. I was trying to get them done today, but just having some writer's block and there's a lot to think about and talk about with these games. So we'll hopefully be getting those out in the next few days. And then, like as you said, it's on to Virginia and ACC play begins. And this is not last year's Virginia team. I'll leave it there.
We have a lot to talk about for that, and we have a lot to expect. We're not going to. I'm not again, folks. One thing that puts a bee in the bonnet of BC sport athletics is speculating on injuries or guessing or whatever. I am not guessing on anything here, folks, unless it's announced. That's it. It's not worth it. Let's leave it at that. We're all hoping he'll be back. And I think we may find that out early in the week because now we have the media having access to practices. Hopefully,
for now.
Yeah. But we'll hopefully get to hear, if he's there and people can ask Bill O'Brien if he's ready. And that's going to be a big thing. So we'll be all over that. So thank you all for listening. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Go over to Eagle Insider where you can see Mitch and my work, including a whole bunch of other writers. And we'll be back again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.